we're going to kind of speed run through tonight because I'm really, really excited about 222 Rollock, and the fact that I've got friends who are excited about it as well is pretty ballin'. So first item on the list, Bungie explains why microtransactions are a good thing for Destiny. This is from Eddie Mackich over, I believe it's Maku. We just call him our boy Eddie over at GameSpot. I'm going to read quite a bit of this to you. It says, Destiny 2 director Luke Smith wrote an incredibly in-depth and detailed blog post today in which he covered numerous hot-button issues about Bungie's sci-fi space game. One of the topics that he touched on was microtransactions. Smith started off by stating that microtransactions are important for live service games like Destiny, in that the money derived from microtransactions helps fund other parts of the game. Quote, MTX, which is microtransactions, is a big part of our business being a live game, Smith said. Quote, I'm not going to say microtransaction funds the studio or pays for projects like Shadowkeep. It doesn't wholly fund either of those things, but it does help fund ongoing development of Destiny 2 and allows us to fund creative efforts we otherwise couldn't afford. For example, Whisper of the Worm's ornaments were successful enough that it paid dev cost-wise for the 0-hour mission rewards to be constructed. This shit matters, end quote. Destiny 2 microtransaction store Eververse lets you spend real money to acquire silver, which you can then spend to buy things like shaders and bright engrams, as well as emotes and various other extras. Looking ahead, Eververse will move to the director, which means players will no longer need to visit the tower to access it. I don't think we're saying anything new in this story. I don't think we're going to unearth anything new, but I think especially as we've had a lot of conversations around loot boxes on this show, I think it's important for us to take a step back and understand, and we mentioned this on PvA Radio, I believe it was last week, about how oftentimes we conflate the conversation about microtransactions and loot boxes into a singular conversation, when in reality, it's not that they're two separate things, but it's a little unfair to talk about them as if they're the same things. It's one of those situations like every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. Of course, loot boxes are a form of microtransactions, but we've seen tons of different games leverage microtransactions to varying degrees of success. And it's true, there are financial reasons that matter for these studios, and there are financial reasons that microtransactions exist, and it's not just a matter of greed. These things are being poured back into these games. I mean, I think about a game like Overwatch, which I've been pumped to play all day. I bought Overwatch at release, and I've bought a copy of Overwatch for PC. So that is $60 on release, and I think I bought it for $20 on PC. So I've spent a total of $80 on Overwatch, and I have not had to pay a dime for anything. No, none of the maps, none of the seasonal game modes, none of the new characters. I haven't paid any real money for skins, anything like that. I played that game for like 1,600 hours. A shitload of time in Overwatch I've spent $80 on that they continue to be able to develop for, because microtransactions in that game exist. And it's done in a very kind of non-invasive way. You can't pay to win in the game. And it has a loot box mechanic, but the loot box mechanic is strictly for cosmetics, skins, voice lines, sprays, those kinds of things. It's nothing that alters the actual gameplay for the game. I would much rather than move to a microtransaction model that says you can buy these skins for X amount of dollars, like a flat rate. But the reason that I have only paid $80 for that game, and I've gotten all of the subsequent support content that's come out for that game following its release, is because microtransactions exist in that game. And there are people who I know personally who have spent a lot of money on microtransactions in Overwatch, and that money just gets funneled right back into the development of the game. And so I think we need to be smarter about our conversations as a gaming community around microtransactions. and really define what it is that we're willing to live with and that we're not willing to live with. And I think that some of these things have been clearly defined by, a lot of people, but I just want to kind of lay it out here. I am totally okay with microtransactions when they're fully cosmetic. In an ideal world, I would love for microtransactions to be modeled in such a way that I know exactly what I'm paying for when I buy it. Let's get rid of blind loot boxes. Let's get rid of like the random mechanics in those microtransactions. I would love to move to, hey, we have seasonal events. There's skins and sprays and emotes available for it. You can pay a flat rate for the things that you want. I would have spent a lot more than the $80 I've spent in Overwatch if I was just able to go in and buy a skin that I want or a voice line that I want. I'm not going to buy loot boxes because that's not my speed. But if they were to say, even if it was like, hey, $4.99 for this skin, I'd probably do it if it was a cool enough skin. And so I think it's a good thing that Luke Smith points this out in this blog of just like, hey, we don't want to overstate this. We do not want to overstate the financial impact that microtransactions have had on the development of Destiny. It does not keep our studio afloat. It does not fully pay for expansions and products like that. That would misrepresent what we're receiving, and it would also kind of damn them from being able to actually ask people to spend money on those expansions if they were being paid for by microtransactions. But he's like, there are real life things in this game that exist because of microtransactions. And I would love to see like the heat map of what percentage of Destiny players buy spend money on microtransactions. Because it's probably, and I'm sure that it's like close to 80% of people who have spent some money in Destiny. But when it comes to like significant chunks of money or people who are regularly going in and buying stuff, paying for microtransactions, I'm sure that those people consistently spending money are a much smaller percentage of the player base. And I think it's cool for them to be able to say, like, look at what we've been able to fund in this game. The 0-hour mission rewards, being constructed is because of the money that I've poured into this game. And I wish developers would be more transparent about that stuff. Show us, like, hey, the money you've put into this paid for this future piece of content. And that would motivate people as fans of these franchises and of these games to say, I'm gonna part with some of my money because I see that it is being poured back into the game to develop some of the things that I love. Like in Overwatch, like, hey guys, the loot boxes that you buy, that pays for paid for the development of Lucio Ball, or it paid for the development of some of the PvE events that take place during the anniversary. And like, we all kind of subconsciously understand that that's how it works, but seeing it just directly laid out here from somebody at a studio is really cool to see to me. And so I think we just need to calm ourselves in microtransaction, because the other option is we're paying piecemeal for every little bit of content that comes out, or we're paying astronomically more for the games that are being developed. And would we rather live in a world where we're paying $90 for a game that has no microtransactions, or $60 for a game that has these like relatively good microtransactions that don't impact gameplay? Me personally, I'd rather just keep paying the $60 and then not buying the microtransactions, kind of like I do now. Because I also don't think that we can put that cat back in the bag either. If we raise the price of video games to $80, $90, that's not going to stop the EAs of the world from putting microtransactions into the game. And so let's continue to have conversations, I think, about what are best practices when implementing microtransactions. Be vocal when we see kind of shit. Like we saw like Fallout 76, the astronomical amount they were charging for some of their cosmetic cosmetic upgrades, their cosmetic microtransactions. Like, continue to call that stuff out, but recognize this is the reality that we live in. And it's probably best for us to just accept it and be able to frame the conversation around it. So, again, not a ton of new thought that I'm giving there to this. This is all stuff we've said either on this show or on, PvA radio. But I think it's worth noting every now and again, especially as the heat gets turned up on the loot box conversation.